You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. Learn about hoarding disorder from me, somebody who has it. I promote a better understanding of hoarding disorder, a stigmatised mental health condition that is mocked rather than treated with compassion. I want to change that, and by talking openly and honestly about hoarding, I hope to start conversations that help. Find out how to support the podcast at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. This episode is sponsored by Cambridge University Press, publisher of Dr. Lynn Drummond's new book, Everything You Need to Know About Hoarding. Struggling with hoarding disorder, feeling ashamed or guilty about your belongings and afraid to let them go is more common than you might think, affecting up to 6% of the general population. But despite its prevalence, seeking help can be challenging. This new book provides a clear description of hoarding, exploring it as a symptom of other issues as well as a condition in its own right. You'll learn about different treatment options and find step-by-step guidance and tools for recovery in the self-help section. Personal narratives and case studies make this guide accessible and relatable for those affected by hoarding, as well as their loved ones and health professionals. Don't let hoarding disorder control your life. Take the first step towards recovery today with this invaluable resource. Everything you need to know about hoarding is out now. Buy your copy at cambridge.org/everythinghoarding, and the E and the H in everything hoarding are capital letters. Get 20% off with discount code HOARDING20. So I am here with Dr. Jan Eppingstall. Jan is a counsellor based in Melbourne, Australia. She has a PhD in hoarding and she specialises in working with people who hoard. Jan, how are you this morning/evening?
I'm fabulous.
So today we are talking about an idea called scaffolding. This started as a term in the study of education in terms of how to help children learn, but it's an idea that we can talk about in other contexts. And it's an idea we can look at as a way to working out how to enable ourselves and other people who hoard to heal and change. And it comes from a beautifully named idea called the zone of proximal development, which is about the range of tasks a person can't complete independently but can accomplish with support. And I came across this idea in a book about something else and messaged Jan and said, I think there's something relevant in this, and you agreed. So can you explain why you thought so too?
I too had come across the idea in relation to neurodivergent teens. And when you raised the topic, I could see how this might be very helpful in building independence over time with people who hoard. I guess what makes hoarding difficult to treat and recover from is that there's both psychological elements, cognitive and emotional, that relate to the accumulation and avoidance of interacting with our possessions. And then there's the physical skills that can be lacking, right, around planning, organising, deciding on ways or ways forward. So, while we kind of would use maybe ACT or CBT, exposure type therapies to reduce anxiety and avoidance when it comes to approaching the problem, in this case, clutter at significantly debilitating levels, there's also the skills element. This is where lack of experience and potential executive function difficulties derail the process. Like they're separate but interconnected things. This idea of scaffolding was kind of a light bulb moment when you brought it up, because I could see how it might be integrated into the practical elements of hoarding recovery. So I was really excited about talking with you today on this topic.
And applying this idea to hoarding, like originally the idea in education, it's not about somebody doing it for us. And it isn't one set thing somebody or something will help you with for the rest of your life, right?
Exactly right. So people who hoard desire and need to be closely involved in the process of engaging with the accumulation of possessions in order to become familiar with the uncomfortable and fear-inducing thoughts, emotions, and sensations that pop up. But they also need support during their de-hoarding journey. It's very much like learning to ride a bike. These days, you start on a trike and you're actually pushed around by an adult before you even know what the pedals are. Have you seen those where people just push them? Yeah, I had those for my kids. Great invention, great invention. Then you might learn how to balance on one of those cool two-wheel balance bikes without pedals. Once you've got a handle on the balancing, you might move on to a bike with training wheels. Eventually, you can ride a bike without support from adults. But you know what? It's exactly like riding a bike. I'm just going to expose myself a little here to illustrate the point of what I'm attempting to make. I learned how to ride a bike growing up, but I lived in New Zealand from the age of 5 to 15. And if you know Auckland's North Shore, shout out Mairangi Bay, you understand that without a 10 speed, you're not going to be tootling about those hills. So I didn't ride. They were just so steep. Fast forward to 29. I'm 29 years old, and we moved to Japan to work. And bikes are the go. Like, everyone has one, and they ride around wearing high heels and suits, texting on their phones with no helmets. My husband and I bought bikes secondhand when we arrived. I told him I could ride, but I hadn't for years. And I don't think he understood exactly what I meant, which really was, I learned how to ride when I was like 4, and then I never touched a bike again. So we go buy the bikes, and he rides off happily down the busy street. I have no idea. I've just arrived in Osaka. I have no idea where I am. I'm completely unfamiliar with where I was going. And I'm still just trying to gain my balance on this damn bike. And he's like 2 kilometers up the road. But I was fine a few days later. So you never forget how to ride a bike, but you might be rusty for a bit. So what I'm trying to say is that when hard times come along, you might need support to get back on the road again. Oh my God, so many metaphors. So yeah, you may need assistance up to a point where you feel like you're independently able to go about the de-hoarding process and support yourself, but then there will be times when you'll need to come back and look for support again.
Yeah, I'm having therapy again after not having therapy for a while because I didn't need support and now I do again.
Exactly. And it's always there for you to come back to. It's not an all or nothing. It's not we get you to a point and then we just let you crash.
Yeah. So the idea is that what our scaffolding might look like will change and evolve over time. It also means that what would be supportive to me might well not be the same as for the next person. Can you talk a bit about some types of scaffolding and how that might look for different people?
Yeah. So this zone of proximal development and scaffolding was developed by Lev Vygotsky about 100 years ago. I remember learning about it at, I think, first year uni or something. So it's not a new concept in the world of childhood development and learning. But its application in the treatment of psychological difficulties is kind of a new lens for me to look through when I'm supporting people, and offers up kind of a multitude of ways to scaffolding that can be used to suit people's various needs. Vygotsky initially suggested external supports from teachers, therapists, or peers, which included direct instructions and guidance, physical assistance, modifications of the environment, utilising tools and resources, and social support and encouragement. So let's think about how this type of external scaffolding might work. So first, we would want to assess the person's current functional levels. That's important so that we can then create something in the sweet spot of challenging yet achievable with support. So it's got to be quite specific so that it's not too easy that it doesn't encourage them to or motivate them to try, but it can't be too hard that they just give up. So initially a person may be able to sort items into categories with external guidance, make decisions about obviously broken or expired items, and practice decision making with the least emotionally charged items. So according to this concept, we would meet the person where they are in an initial high support phase. So then we might shift to moderate support level, where the therapist might say be available by phone during decluttering. They might be there for pre-session planning with independent execution, and then regular check-ins and problem-solving assistance. Then we might drop to minimal, where sessions are client directed with periodic consultation, focusing on like maintaining goals, preventing relapses, and an emphasis on generalizing those skills to new situations or types of objects. And for those listening who are neurodivergent, scaffolding needs additional tweaks. So, for example, ADHDers may need shorter work periods with built-in breaks, for example. Maybe external accountability partners in addition to the therapist to provide structure, and visual reminders and checklists that remain in view. For those on the autism sphere, predictable routines for sessions, for example. I find that very destabilizing for people if they keep getting changed, what time, what day, all that kind of thing. It's an important thing for therapists and support workers to understand that what might seem to you like a little, I'm going to be 2 hours late, could actually just throw them out for the whole week. They like having the clear rules and criteria, and perhaps like the use of a personally created decision tree for functional and sentimental items. Maybe think about having a sensory friendly sorting environment and special considerations for items of special interest. You know, you're not going to have the same rules around the person's special items of special interest than you are with, I don't know, toiletries or whatever it might be. The executive functionally challenged, don't know if I can actually say that, the executive functionally challenged.
You did pretty well.
Which can be context specific for all of us. Some of us are, we get challenged thinking things through logically when we're in particular environments or with particular people. But they might need decisions broken down into binary choice, and maybe templates for categorization that's decided ahead of time to reduce cognitive load. And maybe like a parking lot system, which I've used reasonably often for people for delayed decisions on emotionally charged items. And we also shouldn't overlook the need for emotional scaffolds as we're doing the de-hoarding work. When we're working with a therapist or a well-trained coach, we reach out to their nervous system to regulate ours. So as the scaffolding is reduced, we need self-soothing techniques to manage distress and increase our tolerance of distress when we don't have that regulating person with us. So it is very much a process, and there needs to be good pathways from one level of scaffolding to the next. It makes sense.
It does. I'm thinking of when my dad taught me to ride a bike, and initially he was holding my bike and me, and I would just about touch the pedals. And then over hours and hours and hours, he would just be holding the bike. And then he would just have one hand on the bike. And then he would, just have a hand behind me. And then eventually admitted that he hadn't held on for the last 100 yards and I'd done it all by myself.
Exactly.
And had the first time we went out, had he just held onto the back and then let go, I would have fallen off. But by, God bless him, hours and hours and hours of up and down the street, we got to a point where I cycled everywhere for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a process,
yeah. And some of it can be a little bit tricky like that, letting people be independent without letting them kind of
flail.
Yeah, flail. Exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Did you know that you can get a free weekly email from me by signing up at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/newsletter. You also get a bonus printable with a series of questions that are helpful to ask when you're trying to make decisions about your stuff, all for free. Sign up at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/newsletter and you'll get a link to the printable in your inbox. Thank you. So the obvious way to think of scaffolding is working with a therapist, right? But peer support, informal support, even the ways we talk to ourselves and the systems we set up in our homes can act as scaffolding, I think.
Exactly. The goal of scaffolding is to build capacity for independent functioning over time, not to create dependency on external supports. Makes complete sense. So perhaps even who is assisting us can change from high support from a therapist to minimal support from peer support groups as we get the hang of it. We can definitely use internal scaffolds. So our self-talk, problem-solving shortcuts, memory aids and mnemonics can become kind of that cognitive scaffold. And becoming more aware of our own preferred learning process, like monitor and evaluate compassionately our progress and kind of modify the strategies as often as we need is key. I think it's also important to mention here that many of us struggle with reminder habituation for particular types of activities. So we kind of need to get a bit curious about this, not cross with ourselves, and implement systematic variations of to-do reminders could help. We can rotate visual reminder formats, like switch between sticky notes, whiteboard, digital displays, all that sort of stuff, change colours off in different fonts on rotation. You know what? I reckon there's a whole episode there of ways we fight habituation to external reminders. But you see kind of where I'm going. What works now might not work next week, next month, or tomorrow. So let's plan for that and create contingencies rather than give up on ourselves in disgust. And again, you couldn't do it because everybody habituates to that kind of thing.
Something I've had to consciously change. I used to go, oh, well, that's the kind of thing that will only work for a bit, so it's pointless. Whereas now I go, that's the kind of thing that will only work for a bit, so I'll do it while it works because, yay, it works. But I will also have in mind that at some point it won't and what might be useful next.
Exactly. I think that's really a positive way to look at it because I actually think that that's how I think that a lot of people I work with just think that it works for everyone. They do the same thing and they just have this system and nothing ever fails. Yeah. But that's not what happens. I mean, even today I was doing something. I was putting something away and I'm thinking, why are you putting it away with that many steps? That is just ridiculous. Get yourself something so that you can see what's in there and put it into that rather than pulling everything out and rearranging. But it doesn't happen automatically. You've got to actually think about it and notice it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that assumption that everyone else has it together and we're the only people who don't, isn't it?
So many of us just don't have our shit together. We don't. I'll admit it. I'm one of them.
So I can imagine that some people are listening and imagining scaffolding being taken away over time. Others are thinking of it more as something that changes shape or form over time. Are either of those more accurate than the other in this context?
This is an interesting thought, and I have a few comments to make. Firstly, I think it's personal. It depends on how you as an individual want to view the change over time of your scaffold. What feels good to you? What's more empowering, like being able to stand alone without support or seeing that support might morph and change? It's up to you. I do think it's also important to point out that some situations for some people might always require external scaffolds. But we need to kind of be curious and investigate that. We can't just say to ourselves, for example, I have ADHD, therefore I'll never be able to stop starting new projects before I finish the old ones. We have to kind of test that hypothesis out. Internal scaffolds might be sufficient for routine decisions that you're comfortable and confident with. But when crises hit, you might need to temporarily return to that external support, like we were discussing before. It's not all, smooth sailing. Like we're going to hit bumps in the road, and we need to kind of expect that they will happen and have something up our sleeve.
And as we've referenced a few times, these paths are rarely straightforward. Last year, as I mentioned, I stopped seeing my therapist. We'd done a lot of work. It felt like the right time. Recently, to stick with the scaffolding metaphor, I started seeing her again because my foundations were wobbling. I felt a lot like I'd failed and backtracked, but I'm trying to remember that I haven't. I'm just in a tricky place. And to further torture the scaffolding imagery, maybe there'd been some kind of earthquake and the scaffolding is needed again. I think what I'm saying is, just like healing is not linear, a fact that I resent daily, nor is progress with hoarding recovery or de-hoarding. Is that right?
Yes. We all need a little bit of help sometimes. And you know what? Once you've begun noticing and naming like your blocks and sensitivities, your weaknesses, if you like, you're more likely to notice when you stumble over them again. I think it's more likely in your situation that you've merely stalled and you just need a jump start. You haven't rolled back. God, metaphors are on fire tonight, people. It's difficult to see your progress from where you are, but others who know you notice it quite clearly. We can see it. So I think that's one thing that's really important, is that you're noticing it because you're becoming more aware, and awareness is what is going to help you with the recovery and healing process.
So I think this idea of scaffolding I think it really could apply in a range of ways. Some of it is very practical help based. Some of it is very... When I did an interview a few weeks ago about ADHD and executive function with Carrie, she was talking about setting your home up to work for you. And I think there's a lot of that, the kind of systems we have in our homes. And there's also the emotional work we're doing and just informal social things we can set up, all of which can hold us up a little bit as we try and move forward. And that will change over time. And hopefully the need for some of it or all of it will lessen. But I guess it's about working out what we need and then reevaluating over time.
That's I think that's the piece where you do kind of need some support to help you create those systems, create those behaviors. And as you say, iterate. That's what we all need to do, is just see if it works. Check it out. Have a feel. Is that the right place for whatever it is that has been bugging you, something that you can't seem to get right and you're constantly tripping over, like shoes or whatever. I mean, simple little things. Those systems can actually make things much easier, and it does help to have someone else who has the ideas too. Sometimes we just can't think of what would be better.
Yeah, we get stuck in our own head, and an outside perspective can be really valuable.
Yes, and we also often... what you were saying earlier about, that'll only work for a bit. I often get that stone wall of, that won't work for me, and I want to go, just give it a try. If you could give me evidence that it really doesn't work, that you've given it a bash, cool, let's look at something else. But if it's, that won't work for me, it's kind of, if you haven't tried, then go and try.
A weird benefit of having got quite crisisy lately is if someone suggests something, I'm a bit like, well, everything's terrible. Why not? I'll give it a go.
Exactly. It's freeing, right? It's kind of like this freedom.
Nothing else is helping. Maybe this will do it. I don't know. Not nothing else is helping. That's unfair. But, it's there's something about you can hit a point where you go, why not try the thing I'm convinced won't work? Because what if?
What if?
Jan, it is extra question time. Please pick a number between 1 and 76. This is the bit where I ask guests an extra question. It's sometimes a slightly silly one. And Hoarding darlings get access to this extra question and the answer. If you would like to become a Hoarding darling, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. Okay, back to the podcast. So, Jan, thank you. That's been such an interesting conversation, and it's made me think more about what external help might help me and also what I can set up in my own life as well.
Yeah, it's got my mind churning as well. So, yeah, I mean, this is always a wonderful kind of space to sort of investigate this stuff and, may as well investigate and share.
And that nice synchronicity of I read about it in a book right as you read about it in a book. And I messaged you and said, I feel like there's something relevant. And you went, yeah, so do I. And here we are having this conversation.
Yeah, it was it really was. It really was incredible. I was like, oh my God, she here? What?
She was reading over your shoulder quietly.
But it was really funny.
So if there is one place online where people can find you, it might be your website, might be one of your social medias, where should they go and look for you?
Oh, gosh. My website is probably the best place. Yeah, I think so. Stuffology.com.au. But if you're on Instagram, have a bit of a poke around there.
Jan, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. I'm looking forward to our next. Already. May we take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record and listen to this podcast today. I am speaking on the lands of the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge their connection to country, both land and sea, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
Shout out this week to the Money Love podcast with friend of this podcast, Paige Pritchard. Have a listen to what Paige has got to say about spending to avoid emotions.
And that's the tricky thing about buffering with spending or avoidance spending, you guys, is like in the moment when we feel the negative emotion that doesn't feel so good and we buffer it away with spending, we trick ourselves into thinking that we have actually solved the problem. Because in the short term, it does make us feel better, right? In the short term, it gives us that boost of dopamine and that false pleasure, and it does boost our mood. And we think, okay, I feel so much better. That worked. That solved my problem. But what we often fail to realize in that moment is that what you have just done is you haven't solved for the negative emotion, or you haven't solved for the discomfort. What you've actually done is you have just delegated it. You have pushed it into the future. That future you is then going to have to deal with normally on a much larger scale. So yes, you gave in to the impulse buy because you were feeling sad and overwhelmed and you wanted to distract yourself with the shopping. So you went and you made a purchase and you overspent and you charged it on a credit card. And in the moment, it feels amazing to do that. It feels amazing to swipe the credit card. It feels amazing to get those emails to say like, oh, your package is out for delivery. It feels amazing to get the package and open it and see the product and have it and use it and get to experience it for the first time. Yes, of course, all of those things are incredibly exciting and very, very pleasurable. And so we think, okay, yes, this is it. This is the solution. I've solved my problem to feeling bad. But again, you're not solving for the negative emotion. You've just pushed it into the future. And you've created a larger net negative consequence for yourself by creating debt, by adding to the clutter in your house that future you is going to have to deal with. So the biggest trick with avoidance spending that really fools us into doing it is that we feel like we are solving a problem and that we are doing right. And we are making ourselves feel better in the long term, but really it's just providing yourself with a false pleasure instead of a long lasting, sustainable, true pleasure.
Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. Give yourself a nudge or something, yeah.
Oh, a nudge. Give yourself a nudge. A nudge.
Nudge.
Nudge. I'm excellent. It's evening, but I'm great.
It's morning here. Actually, it's afternoon here. We've been nattering a while.
In this case, clutter it significantly That's where the lack of experience and potential.
All we have to do is talk. Shouldn't be this hard.
It's hard. I should be able to talk. In order to kind of become fill your boots or something. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh my god! Why am I so shit tonight? I'm blaming the Kobo. It broke. It's your grief. It's my comfort.
It enables you to speak.
I'll speak. Okay, let's start.
It's usually me who can't get words out. It's quite a relief.
Oh my god! See, I'm not perfect. I know you thought I was.
I thought you were. Everything's shattering in front of me.
Everything's shattering. Your belief system is imploded now. Physical assistance, modification of the environment, modification. Oh my god! Internal scaffolds might be submissive. I was going to say.